Well, hi everyone. I want to welcome you to another one of our live streams. We are doing a special episode today as part of our Revelation Revealed series. Now, my plan is to make some 8 to 12-minute videos that come out every Wednesday over the next couple of weeks or more. They'll be coming out soon, discussing Revelation Revealed, because I think it's important to understand what the text of Revelation is saying and then how it then therefore speaks into a lot of these political issues that we have going on today, whether it's war, whether it's immigration, all these things that are going on. I think understanding the text of Revelation is going to really help us today. So I'm going to be joined in a few minutes by a special guest. We're going to have a fascinating conversation on Revelation 17 and 18, the great harlot Babylon, who she is, what it means, and all that good stuff. Now, I've published a commentary, and I think my guest is going to maybe upset some of the things I said in my commentary, but that's okay. Maybe I'm here to learn as well, and maybe I'll have to revise my commentary, what have you. But let me kind of begin by just giving you a little bit of a context of Revelation 17 and 18, what I think is going on. And then we'll let our guest come in and kind of give his particular perspective. I think what's happening in the book of Revelation is John's writing to these 7 churches saying, you need to overcome, you need to persevere in faithful, persevering, sacrificial love for the sake of the other, imitating of Christ, following the Lamb wherever he goes. The sacrificial, Christ-following, Lamb-like love is what the essence of the book of Revelation is about. But that's going to require you to overcome. And well, what is it that we have to overcome? Well, we have at least 2 opponents, if not a third, and that'll be part of the discussion for today. First off, we have the beast in Revelation 12, and then we have this, Revelation 13, excuse me, and then we have a second beast. And we'll discuss these in future episodes, but the beast, of course, is, I think the beast is Rome, and I think Rome and the representation of all empires in history. So not just Rome of John's day, which certainly was the beast then, but all empires in history. The second beast is called the false prophet in chapter 16. And I think that is the imperial propaganda wing of the empire, the side of the empire, maybe the media today, the side of the empire that gets you to worship the beast and to support what the beast is doing, its agenda, its propaganda, and this is why this is true, and get you to believe and follow that. Then we have this third individual, this third maybe I'll say right now, opponent of God's people. My guest can maybe correct me if he wants. And that is the great harlot Babylon, Revelation 17 and 18. So let me kind of bring you right there for a second, go over this briefly here, and then I'll bring my guest on the screen. So Revelation chapter 17 and 18 describes this great harlot Babylon. Now notice it begins in verse 1. One of the 7, this is Revelation 17, New American Standard. One of the 7 angels who had the 7 bowls came and spoke with me, saying, come and I will show you. Now, to save a little bit of time, chapter 21, verse 9 has almost an identical introduction to the bride, the wife of the Lamb. One of the 7 angels who had the 7 bowls came and spoke with me, saying, come and I will show you the bride, the wife of the Lamb, Revelation 21, verse 9. But here is the judgment of the great harlot who sits on many waters. Verse 3, he carried me away in the spirit, and I saw a woman sitting on a scarlet beast, full of blasphemous names, having 7 heads and 10 horns. She's clothed in purple and scarlet. She's adorned with gold, precious stones, and pearls. In her hand, she's got a gold cup full of abominations and the unclean things of immorality. On her forehead, a name was written, a mystery, Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and of the abominations of the earth. And I saw that the woman was drunk with the blood of the saints, with the blood of the witness of Jesus. When I saw her, I wondered greatly. So that's really incredible here that John is marveling. I think the Greek could be translated as marveling at this woman that he sees. Why do you wonder? Why do you marvel? The angel rebukes him in verse 7. I think it's a rebuke, perhaps. I'll tell you the mystery of the woman and the beast that carries her. Now, the beast that carries her is certainly Rome. It's the embodiment of Rome. It says, of course, that the beast, the 7 heads of the beast represent the 7 hills and 7 kings. So, verse 9, the 7 heads on which are 7 mountains, which could be translated as hills. Rome's the 7-hilled city. And then it goes on in chapter 18 to describe the fall and the destruction of Babylon. Fallen in verse 2 is Babylon the Great. Now, verse 3 is interesting. For all the nations have drunk the wine of the passion of her immorality. And in verse 4 it says, another angel says, come out of her, my people, so that you will not participate in her sins and receive of her plagues. So whatever she is, she represents the people of God going to bed with her or becoming her, depending on your look here. And John's answer is, if you're going to overcome, you got to come out of her. This is not going to work. Her sins have piled up so that you will not participate in her sins and receive of her plagues. For her sins have piled up as high as heaven. God has remembered her iniquities. Pay her back even as she had paid. Give back to her double according to her deeds. And the cup which she has mixed twice as much as for her. I'm going kind of quickly because I want to bring my guest on. I know we're going to have a great conversation. We'll kind of go over some of this more as we proceed. All right, verses 9 and following then have 3 laments. The kings of the earth lament, and they say, woe, woe, or alas, alas, the great city Babylon, the strong city, for in 1 hour your judgment has come. The merchants of the earth then weep and mourn because no one buys their cargoes anymore. And then there's a list of 28 cargoes. It's wealth and prosperity of the Roman Empire. Very important background that maybe my guest and I will get into here in a few minutes. Verse 14, the fruit that you've longed for has gone from you, and all things that were luxurious and splendid have passed away from you, and our people will no longer find them. The merchants of these things who became rich from her will stand at a distance because of the fear of her torment, weeping and mourning, saying, woe, woe, the great city. The third group then that laments her demise is the shipmaster and passenger and sailors, and as many as make their living by the sea. They also look at the great city and say, what city was like the great city? And then verse 19, weeping and mourning, saying, woe, woe, the great city, which all who had ships at sea became rich by her wealth, for in 1 hour she has been laid waste. Rejoice over her, O heaven, you saints and apostles and prophets, because God has pronounced judgment for you against her. Then a strong angel, which I think is very significantly connecting us to Revelation chapter 5 and the strong angel there, takes up a stone and throws it and says, Babylon, the great city, will be thrown down with violence, will not be found any longer. And then down to verse 24, in her was found the blood of prophets and of saints and of all who have been slain on the earth. So what I'm suggesting, what I argued in my commentary, and I may be corrected here as my guest comes on screen because I've seen some of his notes already, is that she represents the prosperity, the wealth, the privilege of the empire. And she's wed with the empire. She's riding on the empire. And she's power and comfort and pleasure, all the things that entice God's people astray. You know, Jesus says you can't serve God and mammon. She's kind of that mammon thing. And the empire became powerful because of her. The elite did. And everybody else becomes enslaved to do her bidding. And John's telling the church, look, if you're going to be faithful to Christ, empire is going to entice you away. Of course, the beast is going to threaten you with persecution. The false prophet's going to deceive you, and the harlot Babylon's going to lure you away. And I think that's what we're looking at here. So let me go ahead now and introduce my guest and bring him on the screen. So Jason, welcome. Let me get rid of that. Professor Jason Staples. Let me bring up the screen, Jason, that has your bio on it. Jason Staples has a PhD in biblical scholar and is a biblical scholar, historian, and assistant professor in the Department of Philosophy and Religious Studies at North Carolina State University. He specializes in the New Testament, early Judaism, with a particular focus on Paul, Second Temple Judaism, and apocalyptic literature. His groundbreaking work on the identity of Israel and the writings of Paul has reshaped scholarly understanding of key theological concepts in early Christianity. And Jason, while I have that here, I'm going to remove that for a second because I'm going to bring up, oops, not that, the page that has your books that I want to, okay, hold on. Stop the screen share. There we go. Okay, that's how I do it. Got it. Yeah, whatever. I'm not sure what you're trying to do right now, but I'm not going to have nothing to do with it. Here we go. Very good. Jason has written this book here, The Idea of Israel and Second Temple Judaism, A New Theory of the People and Exile and Israel Identity. It's got some wonderful reviewers, by the way. I'm not sure if you've checked that out, by the way, Jason. He's also written a second volume. I think it's your second volume, Jason. You can correct me if I'm wrong, called Paul and the Resurrection of Israel, Jews and Former Gentiles. And one of the things I said to you, Jason, personally about this was I said, I think these two books are going to revolutionize the scholarly world. I think we both know that revolutions take sometimes a generation because scholars they're set in their ways. They're not going to change
sometimes what they're centuries.
Thinking. Yeah, that's right. But sometimes their students get a hold of it. And when those students become the professors, we begin to change an educational system. And I have a feeling in the next 20, 25 years, this is going to be this groundbreaking work. So I want to thank you for being with us today. And for your work and for your friendship as well. We'll talk some golf when this is all over with. I have a feeling as well. So anyways, how are you doing, Jason? Thank you for being with us.
Doing well. And, you know, speaking of golf, my 6-year-old managed to top her best score so far on 9 with a 53 from short distance the other day. So things are going well on that front.
Good, good. All right, we'll talk about that more after we get offline. So I knew he would. So anyways, so Jason, go ahead. Let's talk a little bit, and I'm going to be a little clumsy here as I bring up this, because I want to bring the scriptures back up. You have a lot of good information. What are some of your thoughts here? And let's walk us through your presentation in terms of what you think the harlot Babylon represents and why you think that.
Yeah. So, and you know this, I've been kind of on this train for a long time now. Probably, what, about 15 years was probably about
Yeah.
when I first talked to you about this about 15 years
Yeah.
ago, that I've been sort of swimming upstream on this, because I think that the majority of scholarship for a long time has followed the traditional sort of reading that the woman who has Babylon on her forehead, the great
Right.
whore, as she's often called, or whatever you want to call her, the harlot, as the NASB calls, that she's to be identified with Rome. But I don't think that really works for several reasons. And the first being that I think the beast is Rome. And if Rome is coming in riding Rome, symbolically, that's very puzzling, right? And there might be a few ways around that, but already that's a bit of a problem.
Okay, now
So
I nuanced that a little bit, Jason. If I interrupt you, trying to have a conversation a little bit, I apologize. But I nuanced that a little bit by saying I think she's the wealth or the material side of Rome. Any thoughts on that,
right,
or you
and
want to
I
continue?
mean, I think that's the sort of thing that you have to
Okay,
do
you have to nuance it.
in order to make it work. But I
Yeah,
think there's a simpler way to do this, given what else we have narratively and symbolically within
yep.
Revelation. And the first thing is that I don't think that this is the first time that we've seen this woman. So
Okay,
we've
very good.
already seen this beast before, as you pointed out. We've
Yeah,
seen this beast before in Revelation chapter 13.
correct.
But we've already met this woman too, and that's what's
Yeah,
frequently missed in scholarship. And it's actually sort of frustrating to me that it's so frequently missed. But we've seen her before. We saw her
yeah.
in Revelation chapter 12.
Okay,
And this is the woman who's clothed with the sun, with the 12 stars with the moon. You know, she's clothed with the sun. She's got the moon and 12 stars at her feet. She's this woman who then gives birth to the man child who's caught up to the throne of God, and then she also has other children, and she and her children are attacked by the dragon. And
okay.
then in Revelation chapter 12, she is given wings to flee into the wilderness. So this is a little
Yeah.
bit
Well,
further down.
verse 6. Well, verse 6, the woman fled into the
Right,
wilderness, and then
yes.
again
She
in verse
flees into
14.
the wilderness.
Yeah, the
And then
two wings
again
of a
in
great eagle
verse
were given to the
14.
woman, so she fly into the wilderness to her place. Yeah, so both times. And let me comment here, Jason. One of the things that I did in my commentary, and this is why I'm so curious about what you have to say here, and I think this will help you as well. One of the things that I argued in my commentary at length is that John will constantly and consistently connect passages or stories by repeating certain language or certain terminology. So what's very intriguing to me, and I think this is where you're going, was that the last time we saw the wilderness, when we get to Revelation 17:1, he's carried away into the wilderness, was here. The woman was taken into the wilderness. And that, I'm like, wait a minute. When John's taken into the wilderness in chapter 17 and he sees this woman sitting on a beast, well, the last time he was in the wilderness, the woman that was there was this woman here. So go ahead.
This
Yeah.
woman, right? It's this
Yeah.
cosmic, the astrological symbolism of this is that she's identified with Virgo. Actually, you have Virgo and Draco. There's this whole other celestial aspect to this. But she is, like you said, she goes into the wilderness for her protection. The earth and the dragon pursues her. It spews out a flood after her. But the earth itself, the ground, drinks
Yeah.
up the water and
Verse
it
15.
protects her. This is verse 16. And so the dragon is enraged with the woman and went off to make war with the rest of her children who keep the commands of God and hold to the testimony of Jesus.
Okay.
Well, that's interesting, right? So that connects us to chapter 13. Well, what's the next thing that the dragon does?
Okay. Can we stop for just a second? Because I
Yes.
think we're both in agreement that chapter 12, this woman is, well, it's Israel who gives birth to the Christ child. And I think we see that, of course, in verses 1 and 2. This is Joseph's dream, right?
Right,
Of
right.
course, Joseph's dream had 11 stars, but he's the 12th. That's that. So this is the woman clothed with the sun, with the moon under her feet, and a crown of 12 stars on her head. That's Israel, and I think it's Genesis 39, if I'm not mistaken.
So I would say
And
this is Jerusalem as the city of Jerusalem, who's crowned with the 12 stars that symbolize
okay,
the 12 tribes of Israel.
all right,
Because
but
typically within Scripture, this kind of woman imagery is for
okay,
cities themselves.
okay,
So,
all right,
you have a city like Babylon, the city is identified as a woman. You
right,
have
and so it's the
Nineveh
New Jerusalem.
is right, and the New Jerusalem is a woman,
Yep.
whereas like Egypt as a nation is actually usually identified in more masculine terms.
Hmm.
So you have but you might have Memphis or Thebes or something like that might be in more feminine terms. And I think
Okay.
some of this is just due to the way that the languages work. But this is a common way. And by the way, just in case I get disconnected, there is a banger of a storm outside. So
Oh, okay, because you
just
froze a
let me
couple
know.
times. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So
Okay.
if I do freeze or if anything goes on, you know why. But
I'll go ahead and tell everybody why you're wrong, while you're off screen, then we'll bring you back.
exactly.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Very
Yeah.
good.
Yeah.
Okay,
This
let me
is
go ahead and
God's
add
way
another.
of
Yeah, yeah.
pose, right?
Very good.
So
So
anyway, go
let me add
ahead.
another comment here. Verse 5, she gave birth to a son, a male child. That's the Christ child. There's no question about that.
Right.
I don't think, right? He's going to rule all nations with a rod of iron. That, of course, was quoted in the letter to Thyatira, I think it was, in chapter 2. Reply to Jesus as Psalm 2. Universally applied to Jesus, I think, throughout the New Testament. And then the woman fled in the wilderness, where she had a place prepared by God, and that's what we're picking up here. So go ahead.
Right.
I think you wanted to go to chapter 13.
Yeah, so then the next thing that the dragon does when he decides to make war on her offspring is goes to the sand of the seashore and raises up a beast. So he's not. Did you just lose me?
No, you
Okay.
froze, and I saw you look up for. It must have been some lightning or something like that.
Yeah, there was my lights just flashed. So
That's cool. All right, this is gonna be fun.
yeah, so he raises up the beast out of the sea. And
Okay.
why does he raise up the beast out of the sea? Because he couldn't get to the woman.
Okay.
The earth protected the woman from him. So what he does is he raises up this beast from the sea, and then another beast from the earth, and then we get a little bit of an intermission of what's going on in heaven, and then we get all of a sudden, hey, let me take you back to the wilderness. Let me show you what's going on. And at that moment, the next time this is the next time we visit the wilderness where the woman has been sent.
Right.
The dragon wasn't able to get to her in the wilderness, but the beast was. The purpose that for which the beast was raised up was to get to this woman, and now the purpose of the dragon is accomplished through the dragon's agent, the beast, who the woman actually essentially gets in. Now, we know from like Psalms of Solomon, like chapter 17, for example, and other early Jewish literature, that their criticism of the Jerusalem leadership establishment for getting in bed with Rome. We know that this is the sort of thing that a number of people are not happy with, right?
Okay.
That this is not the way that things should be. And I think this is what we hear. Now, all explain why this woman then so clearly contrasts with the bride as well. Because what we have is we have the same dichotomy that we have in Galatians chapter 4. We have heavenly Jerusalem, which is our mother above, and then we have earthly or fleshly Jerusalem, which Paul says is enslaved with her children. And we have those two that are paralleled opposite one another. For the city of Rome, which is a pagan city, be the counterpart for this, the sort of counterfeit for this spiritual bride. One thinks the bride, but is not in fact the bride, is better understood as the Jerusalem that is here below. And so you see all of these different things that come out with that. And the one of the smoking guns for this, and I, again, it's kind of amazing that so many people have not really identified this.
Yeah.
One of the Revelation hyperlinks this to say,
Okay,
here's
say that
who
again,
this
'cause
is.
You broke up, so I missed it.
Yep.
What hyperlinks it?
One of the ways that Revelation hyperlinks this with that language that tags to other stuff to here this woman is, just in case you don't know, is it verse 17, 18. It says the woman saw great, definite article, the great city, which rules over the kings of the earth.
Okay.
We've already seen that phrase.
Yes,
We've
chapter
seen
11.
that exact tag before.
Yeah.
Earlier in the book, 11:8, where
Yeah.
the two witnesses, it says their dead bodies will lie in the street of the great city, which pneumatically or spiritually or mystically is called Sodom and Egypt, where their Lord was crucified. So what we have is the great city. Here is Sodom and Egypt, and it tells us where their Lord was crucified. So we know who Sodom and Egypt is here. And then here we say, oh, and the great city also is Babylon. Also crucified.
So you're saying, okay, so in chapter 11, you're definitely identifying the great city as Jerusalem. And then chapter 17, you're saying the great city is Rome. And then you're combining the two of them.
Well, I'm saying the great city is Jerusalem, and she's right.
In chapter 18.
So you connect the great city and the he calls the same city the great city in each case, and he just happens to hold back that detail, but he tags it. You could go, wait a second, I know who the great city is. It's where their Lord was crucified. Okay, so I know who this woman is. The other thing that is really, really, really critical here is that she gets paid back double for her sins.
Yeah.
Right? Now, here's the thing. Does that mean that God is unjust? Because it would seem to be unjust to give someone double the punishment that that person deserves. But here, she's paid back not what she deserves, which is what we're told that God deals out to each person, right? This is Romans 2. He gives to renders to everyone or repays everyone according to what he has done. Well, here, she's given double according to... Well, why? Well, this happens to be something else that hyperlinks, that tags back to prophetic literature, where the only times in early Jewish literature, and it's in the prophets, where we see a double judgment where someone gets double for her sins, happens to be of God's people, and actually specifically for Jerusalem, because Jerusalem is of a double sin. This is what Jeremiah says. So in Isaiah 40, verse 2, speak kindly to Jerusalem and call out to her that her warfare has ended, that her wrongdoing, her guilt has been removed, that she has received double from Adonai's hand for her sins, right? So why does she get double? Well, we have it in Jeremiah as well. Jeremiah 16:18. I will repay them double for their wrongdoing and their sin, because they have, one, defiled my land and have filled my inheritance with the carcasses of their abominable idols. Well, that's a twofold sin. And Jeremiah says this a little bit further elsewhere, where he says, be appalled at this, you heavens. And shudder and be desolate, declares Adonai. This is Jeremiah 2:12 and following. Because my people have committed two evils. They have abandoned me, the fountain of living waters, to dig for themselves or carve out for themselves cisterns, broken cisterns that do not hold water. So it's one thing to commit idolatry, which the nations of the world do, right? It's another thing to know God, to have access to the truth, and to put the truth aside in order to pursue the lie. That's a double sin. And what we find in Jeremiah, what we find in Isaiah, is that the God are actually capable of committing a double sin, where they need, you have a couple. You've got in Psalm, I think it's 108. You've got a few other places where the people of God trade, or they exchange, and this, by the way, is the language of Romans 1. You have that notion of exchanging the glory of God for idolatry. That exchange is something that is specific to the people who actually have access to the glory of God. And so that then makes them liable for the double. So as soon as we see that the prostitute here is judged double for her sins, which is something that we never, at least to my knowledge, nothing that I'm aware in any early Jewish literature. Nowhere is this applied to other nations or
Right.
empires or cities. They all get what they deserve. It's only in God's holy city that get double because they actually are guilty of the double sin. So this is a telltale sign
Yeah.
that she should be identified with that. So
Okay.
this is
Now,
one
let me
more
stop you there for a
hyperlink
second.
that I would say. Yep.
That's a very good argument. All right, that's a very, very good point, because what you're dealing with is you're dealing with the text, what it says, and here's its application. Yeah, that's a very persuasive argument. So the two arguments that I think right now so far are definitely weighing in your favor is the last time we saw the wilderness, as we get to 17:1, was
And the last woman we saw.
was the woman that was sent into the wilderness. Correct. And now we see her being paid double for her sins. Let me add one more thought to you, and we didn't discuss this before, and that is, in one sense, you can say there's 4 women in the book of Revelation, right? There's Jezebel in chapter 2. There's the bride of Christ. And then there's the woman here in Revelation 12. Right? Then there's the harlot in Revelation 17 and 18. And then there's the bride. Okay. Are you going to connect the Jezebel with the harlot? Have you thought of that?
I haven't.
Okay. All right.
I'm not persuaded by that. I mean, just because they're women who are judged, and they each are guilty of porneia, doesn't make them the same woman. And I don't think we have other tags between them other than just porneia in terms of the language. And again, the thing that really does this for me in identifying the woman from chapter 12 and the woman from 17 and 18 is the narrative flow of, okay, woman in wilderness, then we move on, and then we see woman in wilderness again. And also the beast who is raised up in the woman in wilderness happens to be the same. I mean, it's clearly the same beast. It has the same 7 heads and 10 horns and so on.
Right.
It's clearly the same beast as chapter 13. So if we have a woman in wilderness in the same passage as the reemergence and reappearance of the beast, why would it not be the same woman in the same wilderness then?
Okay.
That's the part where I see a lot more interplay, a lot of tagging intertextually between 17 and 18 and chapter 12 than what I see in the letter where you have a reference to Jezebel. So I'm open to being persuaded, but I haven't really noticed any stuff there. The other thing is, I think chapter 12 through 20 is basically a continuous. I do think that there's some middle material there.
You
between,
broke up. You said 12 through 20 is a continuous, and then you broke up.
Narrative,
continuous
I think.
Narrative.
So
Okay.
Yeah, I think there is some going on in heaven between, say, chapter 13 and the raising up of the beast and all this. You get that.
Let's talk about that one later, because I can discuss that with you. I think that would get us off track a little bit. Maybe so. I argue differently. I argue that 17:1. Well, maybe we can have the conversation now if you wish. But in accordance with Baucham's thesis, and I've refined, I think, expanded his thesis a little bit, that what you see in 1:9 and 1:9 through and following is John's on a location. He's on Patmos. He's in the spirit. 4:1, John's in the spirit again, but he's now changed his location. Right? And that location now is he's taken up into heaven, and he sees God sitting on a throne. 17:1, he's again in the spirit and is again told, come. So in chapter 4, he's told, come. He didn't have to come in chapter 1 because he was already there. Chapter 4, he's told, come, and comes to this new location. 17:1, he comes to a new location, and he's in the spirit. And then 21:9, he again comes to a new location, and he's in the spirit. And so I think those are what I see the 4 major sections of the book of Revelation. 1:9 through 3:22 is your first, what I call a scene or a story. John's on Patmos, 7 messages. 4:1 through 16:22, I think it is, or 21, is your second scene. And then 17:1 is a third scene through 19:10. And then 21:9 through 22:9 is a 4th scene. and then you have a bridge section 1911 through 21:8. I know it's a lot for our listeners to get a hold of there, but it's all in my commentary if you get a copy of it.
Yeah.
So what I see then
which is only $9.99 for Kindle, everybody.
Exactly right. Yeah. What you see then, and the point of the conversation here for us, Jason, is 17:1 through 19:10 is a contrasting account of a woman who's a city, and with the bride who's a city. One's a harlot, and one's obviously the people of God. So I think so. So I wouldn't put 20 in there as part of the story. I think I would break it up that way there. But nonetheless, anyways.
Yeah, you froze a little bit. You said you wouldn't put 20 in there, and I lost you there, but I know where you're going. So, but I agree actually with most of your structural.
Your screen's a little fuzzy right now still too. That's okay.
Yeah, I agree with most of your structural.
Okay.
Yeah, it's probably for the better, but
I wasn't going to go there.
I agree with your structural analysis, or most of it. But that doesn't. So different scenes don't mean that you don't have a narrative. And I think we need to be able to differentiate between
I agree.
Structural scene analysis and whether there's actually a continuous narrative. And I think I think what we have, especially when you start to get the same characters that reemerge and that reappear in these different scenes. Yeah. And there's progress in the narrative. Yes. I think when you go from 12, 13, 14, and then you go 17, 18, 19, I think those are of a piece. Now, he puts them in different locations. He puts them in a different scene context, and he puts other stuff to them. And we really want to get into the weeds here. I think used with a ring structure. So it's you are with the notion of ring composition, so that there's you keep going around the ring essentially, so that scene that sets the stage, and then
you're breaking up quite a bit right now, Jason.
Basic stuff, but
okay. Is this a recapitulatory kind of idea?
Yeah, recapitulatory kind of idea.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's pretty common in the ancient world for that to happen. And this is where
you're saying you're saying that there's a story, it's kind of cycling, but each cycle is moving forward though, right?
Right. Yeah.
In the larger narrative.
Actually, there've been some people argued that the Star Wars the first three and then the three prequels are actually designed initially as a ring sequence where they're supposed to rhyme in various ways, and Lucas has kind of confirmed that. And again, it's a folktale way of telling stories, and it tends to be very satisfying to the watcher or the hearer. And we don't tend to teach that way of doing narrative anymore. Modern novels and so on don't tend to work this way, but a lot of ancient storytelling, and I think Revelation does. All that really matters for my purpose here is that you see the characters and the progression in 12, 13, 14, and 18. We're used to those scenes again in a new scene, new environment, but we see development of happened in the interim of where that has all gone. So that's the basic way that this works. And then we get again to my other question is, if this woman is riding on the beast, if she's actually to be identified with the city of Rome, then who exactly is the beast? Now, again, you can potentially try to parse the aspects, or she's the city of Rome and the beast is the empire of Rome, or political versus, mercantile. I'm not persuaded.
Okay, let me ask, and you're breaking up quite a bit. I apologize for our listeners, but there's a big thunderstorm going on in North Carolina, and Jason's in the middle of it. He's frozen now completely. So, let me see. Okay, yeah, there you are. All right, let me go ahead and ask you a couple. I want to ask a couple questions in terms of what do you do with this verse? What do you do with that verse? What do you do with that verse? I think your overall presentation's you've made your case, if I'm not mistaken. If you want to add, you froze again. There you go. Got a nice smile at least. There you go. All right. I think if you want to add to your presentation, that's totally fine as well. But I want to ask you a couple questions about chapter 18 and how you answered that in light of your thesis. And then I want to ask the question of, why does this matter in terms of what the meaning is for us today and what the message of John was to his churches that he was writing to and what that means for us today? And then I think, of course, that there's a criticism that that maybe we'll get to at the end as well. So let me go back to the verses here. Chapter 18, it makes the comment that, okay, I think you did a great job with chapter 17, verse 18, the woman whom you saw is the great city, saying that's Jerusalem. Because your argument is, if that's Rome, then Rome's writing on Rome. That doesn't make any sense. And so even my nuancing of, I think you've done a good job with that. All right, so here we go. So you've got here at the end of 18, it says, Babylon, the great city, will be thrown down with violence. In verse 21, will not be found any longer. The harpists, musicians, flute players, trumpeters will not be heard any longer. And then verse 24, and her was found the blood of the prophets and of the saints and of all who, I think I'm answering my own question. Very good.
What does Jesus say about the prophets?
Yeah.
And whose blood?
I just answered my own question. I'm like,
it's,
wait a minute.
I mean, this
isn't
is
Rome that's responsible for the blood. And it's like, no, it's prophets, saints, and of all who've been slain on the earth.
Right.
And I'm thinking of all who've been slain on the earth, but yeah, that actually makes a lot more sense.
And what does Jesus say about, a prophet has to die where?
Yeah.
And, you who killed the prophets, and also, when he explicitly says, the prophet has to die in Jerusalem, right? So, he says, you will be found guilty of the blood of all the prophets from
Abel to Zechariah.
So Revelation knows this stuff, I think.
Yeah, very much. All right.
And is completely interacting with this. And again, when we start to play the intertextual game, this starts to line up shockingly well.
Okay. So let me go one more step then with you. And that is, the dating of Revelation, I think, kind of comes in a little bit here, right? Maybe not. Because the question of, has the parting of the ways taken place yet? And so for the listeners here, is that the parting of the ways is kind of this divergence between Judaism and Christianity. So would you say at the time of Revelation's writing, and I don't really care about your date for the most part, doesn't matter too much, but would you say that your understanding is that Christianity and Judaism hasn't had a great divide yet? So this isn't a Jewish Christian argument that Paul's making, which kind of leads, of course, into the last criticism. This is a Christian critique of, I wouldn't even say Christian. This is an interfaith critique. Okay.
Yeah, I agree with that. I don't think that we've seen a full parting of the ways at this point.
Okay.
At the very beginning of Revelation, you have this polemic against those who say that they are Jews, but are not.
But are a synagogue of Satan.
Right? So this is insider kind of language where you have people who are battling over who the real Americans are. Right? When you have a battle over whether they're real Americans or whether we're real Americans, the thing that you actually know is that both sides are Americans. That's the thing that you know at that point. You're not actually having that debate later on if you have a complete secession of one group from another. Right? You're no longer having a debate between the North and the South in the Civil War over who the real Americans are, right?
Okay.
You have the Confederates and the Union. This is the way that works. So in this point time period where the target here, this is not a target. They're not the author of Revelation is not targeting. The author of Revelation is very much opposed to the Jerusalem establishment and to what Jerusalem has come to represent. He's completely on board with the prophecy against the temple made, for example. When Jesus goes into the temple and proclaims that the temple will be destroyed, Jesus isn't saying Judaism, I'm no longer everybody, just letting you know, Judaism is no. Not what that's saying. You have made the house that's supposed to be a house of prayer for all nations. You have made it into a den of, and God, and deal with that. From saying tired that this temple exists at all, or you need to completely abandon whatever. It's not that. So for me, Revelation, and by the way, I'm very agnostic when it comes to the dating of Revelation, because I think this critique could work in the
Yeah.
60s. I think it could work at around 100. I mean, it
Right.
could work either way. I tend to lean toward a later date
Me too. I do.
because of some of the imagery that shows up that happens to match some of the numismatic evidence that we have
Yeah.
from imperial material from around 90, 95 area that we know of,
Right.
that really maps well onto the book. And I don't think it has to be that. I mean, it could potentially, there might be similar imagery from 30 years earlier that we just don't know about yet. And so I'm agnostic about that. But either way, I think what Revelation is doing, he is basically, this is a
You're freezing on us.
just
You-
am I frozen again?
A little bit. Yeah. Yeah. We
Okay.
missed the last 5 seconds or so of what you had to say.
Okay. But what he replicates in symbolic form, a lot Jesus says in his prophecies against the temple in, say, Matthew 24, Mark 13. I mean, even the four horses and their riders earlier on map on to the signs of the times that Jesus says right at the beginning of the synoptic
exactly.
apocalypse.
Yeah.
Right? They're the same figures.
Yes. Yes.
What Revelation is doing, and actually I think Revelation already knows at least maybe Mark, maybe more in terms of that, and links to what Jesus has to say in that discourse.
It's Revelation 6. There's no question about that. I've literally been making videos, by the way, and practicing and editing that's hopefully going to come out next Wednesday on Revelation 6, part 1, at least will come out next Wednesday on Revelation 6. And one of the points that I'll make in video 2, of course, is the link between Mark 13 there. And I think it's very important for interpreting Revelation 6.
I actually think Revelation, version already, which would
say it
put
again.
Revelation.
You broke up a little bit. You always think, you think what?
So I think Revelation may specifically know Matthew's version.
Okay.
Not married to that idea, but I do think that's very.
Okay.
I think it's
either way.
Again,
I think 6
that would
parallels Matthew 24, Mark 13, Luke 21 enough that it doesn't matter which one he's actually using. Okay, so if we can change
that pushes him later. But either way, if that's what Revelation is actually developing, what's Jesus talking about in Mark 13, Matthew 24? The destruction of Jerusalem, the fall of the temple, and so on. And this is where, again, the final is the other big consumed by the beast itself.
Okay, so we missed almost everything you just said. Say it again.
So the other big smoking gun here is that the woman is destroyed, burned, and consumed by the beast itself.
Okay.
Right? This is Revelation 17:6. The 10 horns that you saw in the beast, these will hate the prostitute, and they will strip her desolate and naked, and will eat her flesh and burn her up with fire. If the woman is Rome, when does Rome get burned up with fire and desolated by the beast?
You think this is a reference to the destruction of Jerusalem?
Yeah.
In 70 AD?
The beast itself will hate the harlot and will make her desolate and naked and eat her flesh and burn her with fire.
Okay.
When does the beast turn against the city of Rome or against its own, mercantile arm or whatever? What we do know is that the people in Jerusalem were in bed with Rome sufficiently enough.
Yes.
Again, if we read the Gospels, they're Rome enough to turn Jesus over to Pontius Pilate to get him executed.
And that includes the Pharisees too. Not as much as the Sadducees, but certainly includes the Pharisees.
It includes the whole power infrastructure of Jerusalem, right? But that power infrastructure of Jerusalem is perverse and in bed with the Romans, and then what happens to them? They get what's coming to them when Rome turns on them eventually, and then the city burns, the temple is burned, and so on, and it results in this desolation. To me, the whole thing makes sense as soon as we understand Jerusalem in its power and earthly connection to sleeping with empire. And this is also where this comes back to, you wanted to get into the question of the modern theological
what does this mean for us?
side. What does this mean for us? Well, as Christians, the great sin Jerusalem commits here is getting in bed with earthly empire.
Okay, very good. All right.
Right? And
Yeah.
this is not why I do this eugenically, but now that I look at it, in hindsight, I go, this preaches better. It's one thing to say, oh, well, she's Rome and we should be in Rome. We need to distance ourselves from Rome or whatever. Completely different thing to say, look, she's the woman from chapter 12, and when she gets in bed with Rome, when she gets in bed with earthly empire, and she grasping earth power and doing all that's necessary to play in the game of worldly politics, she winds up drinking the blood of the saints. She not only commits adultery again and situates herself. She is not the heavenly bride that she thinks she is, that she presents herself as. Instead, she becomes she never actually weds. She becomes the plaything of the powerful, the earthly power, and she situates herself here in the fleshly realm and is consumed in the fleshly realm. So the danger for us, as we look at this, if we talk from a church perspective, from a Christian perspective, it is not our job, it is not our place to try to grasp the levers of power and to try to get in bed with empire or with political government to try to make this world, this physical world, this fleshly world right. Our job is to be salt and light, not to grab for the wheel, not to grab for the levers of power. And the moment we do that, we have to give something of ourselves in order to get that power. And we're going to have to give the thing that differentiates us and separates us in order to play that game. And for Revelation, that is the ultimate betrayal of the kingdom of God, is to embrace all the things that come with the kingdoms of this world. This is the equivalent of Jesus saying, oh yeah, you want to give me all the kingdoms of this world? In that case, yes, I will bow down to you. That's what this represents.
Oh, okay. So I think you can hear what you said two ways, and I want to make sure that we're clear on this. One of the ways that I could hear what you just said, which I don't want to go off on that path, and most of our listeners won't understand what I'm talking about, is kind of a Christian Reconstructionist, Christian nationalist agenda. And I'm not sure if you meant that or not, or if that's part of it. The other part of it, where I would certainly think we have to go as well, is the idea of compromising with empire in order to secure food, in order to secure a job, in order to secure well-being, sustainability. Remember, most of the people in the Roman Empire were, there you go. You're freezing and unfreezing on me. So, but most of the people in the Roman Empire were hand to mouth. They lived day by day, every single day, not knowing where tomorrow's food is going to come from. But compromising with empire and giving in to empire would be a means of securing, at least within the system of the world, of the Roman world, their own well-being for the day. And I think this is what Jesus is getting at. You can't serve you can't serve God and mammon. You can't serve two kingdoms. I think I would absolutely quote, Mark 4 and Matthew 4 and all that good stuff with the temptation of the devil. I think it's on an individual level of compromising with empire for the sake of your own comfort, prosperity, power, etc., not just us getting together and trying to get empire in the Christian nationalist kind of way. I'm not sure if you heard everything I said there. It was really good, by the way. I hope you did. But any thoughts on that?
I fully agree. And one of the reasons that I fully agree with that is that we see that Jerusalem has become a systemic enslaver. Yes.
Which is how you need to read the Gospels, people. You have to. Jesus was battling the fact that the empire had consumed the Pharisees, the Sadducees, the rich young ruler. He's taken land from others, and the people are without land. Jesus was dealing with poverty and an impoverishment because of what Rome had done and what the religious leaders and others had done, and the wealthy. Yeah, I totally agree with you.
He condemns all of the rapaciousness that we see. What happens with the tax collectors? He pardons them when they return the graft that they've pulled in order to enrich themselves. Right? This is the thing, and so in that sense, Jesus is not against people managing to help produce good things and making an honest living out of that. Right? What Jesus is against in this context is essentially rent-seeking and rapacious theft that essentially involves pushing others down so that I can make my way further up the ladder. And that is the way of this world. And what Jesus comes in and says is the kingdom of God is about the reverse. It's about elevating other people. And if I do that, then ultimately the rule of the kingdom of God is if I work to elevate other people, then God will elevate me and all of us will end up. This is the rising tide that lifts all boats. It's not actually trickle down. It's actually the water of the heavenly Jerusalem rises up from underneath and lifts those boats, and it's our job to do the work to lift others up and to be agents of justice in the world. And where justice goes, then everyone thrives. But what we see early on with a measure, what is it, basically a loaf of bread for a denarius, for a day's wage, right? So you have in Revelation 6, you have these sky high prices where in order to eat bread, you need a full day's wages for just barely enough to eat.
Enough grain for one person, or 3 quarts of barley for a denarius, which is enough grain for maybe a small family. But but all you're getting is grain.
Right. You're eating. You're barely on subsistence, right?
You can't, because you can't provide anything else.
Right.
You can't pay rent. You can't pay taxes.
But do not harm the oil or the wine.
Exactly, because the wealthy are going to be unaffected.
Because the wealthy are still throwing a party and saying, "Let them eat cake."
That's right.
Right.
That's right.
So this is the critique that Revelation makes, and the problem that we see in the woman is that she is happy to ride right along on top of the beast and live it up and drink the wine that we've just seen. Do not harm the oil or the wine. She's drinking it. But the wine is actually the blood of the saints.
Oh, okay. So let me add this. And I think we both might want to think about this more, whether or not we need to correspond this understanding of the woman in Revelation 17:18 with Jezebel. But whether that's correct or not, I think what's critical for the listeners here as we finish up is the understanding of the fact that, let's go to Jezebel in Revelation 2. There's a woman who calls herself a prophetess, but she teaches and leads my bondservants astray. They commit acts of immorality, and it's horrible. But the church in Thyatira probably thought she was a good gospel teacher. And John's like, no, she's Jezebel. And I think what I want to stress here is that the church is the one that has to worry about the deception coming within our walls. And yet we think, oh, we're good and everyone else out there is bad. And if John's like, no, you guys understand, you're in bed, you've colluded with Rome. Now, we look at that, Jason, in the 21st century, we go, well, Rome was obviously so bad. There's no way you could do that. And we go, but they did. And John had to bring it to their attention. And did they listen to John or did they listen to Jezebel? Right? I mean, that's an interesting question that we have to ask. And then we go,
where's the church of Thyatira today?
Exactly.
Did their lampstand get removed?
We are the ones who've been deceived by empire and don't realize it. And that's exactly the message that I'm trying to get out in this whole series that we're doing, Revelation Revealed. So a couple quick comments here. There's a comment in the box there. Thank you so much for your time here, Jason, as well. But I'm literally in process the last several days of producing some 8 to 12 minute, 15-minute videos walking through Revelation 6. Maybe I'll touch on 8 and 9, Revelation 13, and then of course 17 and 18. That's what this one's about here today. Talking about what does the book of Revelation say, and how do we use what we understand from Revelation to say, therefore, what do we look at when it comes to foreign wars, when it comes to the economic bill that was passed by the Trump administration, or whether or not immigration, and we don't have to go there, Jason, but immigration issues that are going on in our country. How do we process all these? I think we can't process these things well because we don't have a full understanding of what the scriptures are actually talking about there. So that's kind of the idea of this whole series, and that's what this is doing here as well. I want to encourage you to subscribe to the German Truth YouTube page. I plan on dropping those videos every Wednesday, and that'll be the plan. And then after I'm done with that series, I hope to drop a whole series walking through the whole book of Revelation 1 through 22 YouTube videos. We do have about 60 videos. I think Jason, I'm not sure if I interviewed you for that series or not, but we did 60 podcasts on the book of Revelation already. I think I'm going to go back and redo a little bit of 17 and 18 again in this conversation, because I knew there was more. I knew you were onto something, Jason. maybe add an addendum to the Revelation 17:18 series that we did, but there. So, all right. Any other thoughts that you might have, Jason, here? Oh, you froze. All right. I guess that means you don't have any more comments right now, Jason. So those of you guys who are watching in right now, there's a big thunderstorm going on in North Carolina where Jason's at. He should come to Arizona. We don't have any thunderstorms. It's about 113 outside. Wonderful. There you go. All right. Anything you want to add before we sign off?
No, I think we've just about pulled off the turkeys or all the feathers off that turkey. But the biggest thing I guess I would add is, again, this does force us, I think, to do exactly what you were talking about, and that's to evaluate. This doesn't mean that every war that a given empire in the United States is in the position of a global empire. No doubt about it. We
are an empire, yes.
But that doesn't mean that every war, every action of war that is done by that empire is inherently wrong. But this is why you have a just war tradition within Christianity. This is why you have the question of, okay, are you going to war in order to gain more human lives and in order to gain, oil or whatever resources that you need to protect? Or are you going to protect people who otherwise, who essentially you're playing global police? In some sense, the latter is more important, right? The latter actually is defensible to say, look, and this is actually the primary defense of empire as an institution, and it's where I think we have to be cautious of saying that we need to side against empire all the time, because the reality is, in most cases through world history, empire has actually resulted in a larger and more productive time of peace and generally prosperity than the alternatives, because you have trade and things that come in, and it reduces friction. And then the problem is you take the biggest sword out of the room and then everybody starts fist fighting. And so, okay, at a certain point, this is where Romans 13 comes in, and God gave the magistrate the sword for a reason. But here's the question: is the magistrate using the sword justly?
And we're not critiquing that. We're not asking those questions.
Right.
Rome was established peace on the backs of millions of slaves.
Right.
Rome
it was a slave empire.
The Pax Romana by slaughtering thousands, if not millions, of people, enslaving the rest, raping the women, and that was not critiqued. And the church, I think, is doing the same thing today, and I think historically has been doing so. So yeah, of course, I think there's a need for empire. There's a need for. I understand the fact that nations have to have armies. I get that, but
what is the role of the church in this? The role of the church is to be the prophetic voice and say, you can't do that.
Martin Luther King Jr. Absolutely, we are to be the conscience of the state.
That's right.
The slave of the state. So, all right, hey, thank you so much. I appreciate your time, and let's continue this conversation. We'll continue offline for a few more minutes, I'm sure, because we have some golf to talk about. Thank you, everyone, for listening in, and take care.